I hate sport. If you ask me, sport belongs in a news bulletin about as much as a mummified cat's head belongs in a Caesar salad. So imagine my confused horror when quite recently a sports story without any sport in it made it into the news.
The saga began when England captain John Terry, this bloke apparently, allegedly cheated on his wife with a lingerie model who used to go out with one of his teammates. The News of the World were about to print these allegations when Terry's lawyers took out a super injunction.
Super injunctions are interesting legal weapons, really. They don't just gag the press, they gag them from mentioning the existence of the gag. In other words, you know how people used to say, I could tell you, but then I'd have to kill you? Well, these days they just kill you.
Anyway, a judge lifted the super gag, much to the delight of the triumphant News of the World lawyer with a logo stuck to his head, who turned up all over the shop to cry about what a victory for free speech this was.
Too often in these cases, the public's right to know is ignored in preference to the so-called protection of incredibly wealthy and pampered footballers and other celebrities.
Yeah, you know, they hate the wealthy and pampered at News International because they're owned by one of the poorest and least indulged billionaires on the planet.
Now everyone was free to gab about it. The story got more traction than it deserved, making the leap to Stern TV news bulletins in the process.
Will Terry's secret affect his England captaincy? A gagging order is lifted about his private life.
But the question of whether Terry would remain captain wasn't going to be answered for a week. He wasn't talking, his wife was away, his teammates were making no comment, the model was weighing up her options, and the England manager was overseas recovering from a knee op. Nothing was happening. So in order to justify its presence in the bulletin, the News had to play keepy-uppy with the story.
One way to keep the ball in the air is to repeatedly report on the fact that you're repeatedly reporting on it. That way you can refer to mounting pressure.
Pressure is mounting on the England captain John Terry.
Pressure on John Terry didn't show on the pitch.
There's no let-up in the pressure on John Terry this morning.
Or you can say there are growing calls for him to resign.
There have been growing calls for him to resign.
There are growing calls for John Terry to be sacked.
The England captain faces growing calls to quit.
Combine the mounting pressure with the growing calls and you've got yourself a media whirlwind, which you can also refer to.
There is no easing of the media whirlwind swirling around John Terry today.
To ensure the pressure kept up, the reporters got their stalking gear on and headed out to stand around entertainingly looking for Terry.
Any sign of John Terry there today?
Yes, in the past half hour I've just seen John Terry.
Yes, there he was, through the trees, and as the cameras peered at him through the branches like a serial killer, it was easy to see where all this pressure we'd heard about was coming from.
Because by now his every move was under surveillance, and wherever Terry went he walked headlong into a storm.
Stepping off the team bus and into a media storm. Stepping onto the pitch and into a storm of controversy.
With its quarry thus encircled by a zillion watchful eyes, the News waited for something to give. Meanwhile, the tabloids were busy smearing their pages with all the shit they could find. A stealthy PR war had broken out, which meant scintillating sawaway snaps of Tony Terry strategically appeared alongside aspersions about Vanessa Perencel's morals on one side, while Max Clifford paraded his latest catch on the other, in scenes which closely resembled an age-gap romantic subplot from a rubbish soap opera he was directing.
Of course, in any soap you sometimes have to do more than one take, which Max thoughtfully allowed ITN to do in this revealing clip.
Hold on, you don't have to break your neck somewhere. If you want to go back, we'll start again from here if you want.
And while Max got all Albert Square on us, we were treated to plenty of displays of expert dribbling. We heard sexy football experts dribbling about how it would affect morale.
What will be the impact in the dressing room?
Bearded talk show ballbags dribbling about it in radio studios.
What he does in his private life is nobody's business whatsoever.
It is.
Erudite broadsheet pundits dribbling about it on Newsnight.
He's a kind of snorting priapic bull. That's who you want, leading the men into battle.
And silly callers to the right stuff dribbling about whether they'd rather marry Terry or Tiger Woods.
Helen on line 2.
Helen, good morning.
Good morning.
Tiger or Terry?
I'd go for a tiger.
But perhaps the finest displays of dribbling of all were performed by extreme self-caricature wag Lizzie Cundy, who was suddenly omnipresent.
As a wag, Lizzie Cundy knows how tough life can be in the spotlight.
She spilled her brains on the 5 News sofa.
No one knows more than John Terry today how foolish he's been.
Yeah, and the real tragedy is he's also too foolish to appreciate what insight his own foolishness gives him.
She appeared on family-friendly GMTV to hear Ben Shepherd say players shouldn't let an erection cloud their judgment.
Even if these girls are throwing themselves at the footballers, no matter how hard it is, they should be able to say no.
She even took part in synchronised dribbling as Sky News brought blokes and birds together for a polarising debate about it all, in which a blokey bloke bloked on about how it broke the sacred credo of bloke.
If you apply bloke rules that, you know, we talk about down the pub, you know, over a beer, people will say he's completely out of order.
Yeah, completely out of order over your pint of tits. Down your bloke pub.
Let's be honest, if John Terry scores the winning goal in the World Cup, you know, people are going to forget about this.
Yes, of course, if Terry scores the winning goal in the World Cup, people will indeed forget about this, but should he be playing as captain?
In The Sun, Ian Wright suggested the players should hold a ballot, a scenario illustrated with a startlingly realistic image of Wayne Rooney at the ballot box, casting what was either a very vague vote or possibly his signature. Meanwhile, according to every sanctimonious tittermaboob in Pressville, John Terry should definitely go, although most punters quizzed by Sky didn't seem quite as judgmental as the journalists.
It's off the pitch, we shouldn't really care what happens off the pitch.
It's his personal life and he should be allowed to deal with that himself without it being in the papers, the press, everywhere you look.
He's done nothing wrong that thousands of people in this country haven't done since time immemorial, especially people like MPs, people at the higher end of the strata. So
there's a man who's never seen the Jeremy Kyle show.
Although some of their viewers, presumably sickened by the sight of Terry looming large and peering over the host's shoulder, seemed less than impressed with the whole of football.
Emails coming in saying, you know, what's the matter with these footballers? They can't string a sentence together, and yet they say that you know, they have...
Still, the question of whether Terry should be captain or not was about to be answered as Fabio Capello returned to act as a pressure magnet.
All the pressure now on Fabio Capello.
In fact, the pressure was now on both of them and the coverage reached fever pitch. Capello was bothered at the airport.
No comments, please.
Excuse me, guys. When are you expecting to meet him?
No comments, please. I just arrived. Wait.
He was followed to his car. He was shown limping into his flat.
Lives in a top floor flat. It's quite a climb, isn't it, when you've just had an operation on your knee?
The next morning he was helpfully shown limping out of his flat. Sky's vulture cam took to the skies so we could look down on John Terry slightly more than we already did, and other cameras showed him leaving the Chelsea grounds on his way to Wembley in his car. As Capello waited at Wembley, the news desperately zoomed in on any vehicle which looked like it might be driven by an adulterer, and then the meeting itself took place and the inevitable occurred.
John Terry has been sacked as England captain after a week of damaging allegations about his personal life.
Yes, Terry got the chop. All that pressure had paid off. The one good bit of news for John Terry was that for whatever reason, Vanessa wasn't going to sell her story, an announcement she made via Max Clifford, who now appeared to be directing a soap scene about his own private life.
Yeah, you're up to speed.
Yeah, straight down the road.
Talking at this level, okay. I haven't spoken to anybody about my private life. They have spoken to everybody about my private life.
Anyway, if a super injunction makes a story disappear because the news can't talk about it, the whole Terry affair was the polar opposite, a lurid story that largely exists because the news is talking about it. It was an unedifying tussle over the sexual morality of a man who kicks a ball around on a lawn for a living, which made everyone involved look a bit rubbish, but worst of all, upset one little boy!
Were you upset by the decision?
Proud of yourself, are you? The news? You monster.